Hey everybody, Ben Fetzer, Advanced Microbial. I want to talk about crawl spaces. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video, and I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on the subject. A crawl space is simply a space below a home. They exist a lot in the Midwest. They're down in the South as well. Not so much out west, like in Colorado where I grew up. I'd never seen one until I moved to the Midwest. And these were essentially created in like the 50s, 60s era and before that, but these were really common because it was less expensive to build a home with a crawl space as opposed to a uh, a full basement where they've poured a concrete floor and tall concrete walls that are say 7 feet tall. It's a lot more expensive to do that than to just dig a hole, pour a foundation to support the home, and then leave the floor dirt. So that was the cheaper way, and that's why they essentially created crawl spaces. And they also had another dilemma associated with crawl spaces. When they were building these, they did not consider air quality, they did not consider humidity control as they were designing these and building these homes. It was just not an issue, and it was not something that was thought of ahead of time. So a lot of these crawl spaces just have zero humidity control. They might have ventilation, and they did have an idea back in the day when they designed these to move air through the crawl space. But essentially, there's ventilation on all sides, or at least two of the four sides of the crawl space, and air just comes in and sits there, and lots of times that air is humid and it just stays in that space, and humidity builds and climbs and it doesn't go anywhere. That air gets stagnant, and prolonged high humidity is the norm in these crawl spaces. So what does mold need? It needs a source. That's your wood, that's your structural wood, maybe even the paper on the insulation. And it needs water or high humidity. So some of these crawl spaces have both problems. They have water that kind of floods the floor of the crawl space, so you have like mud for parts of the year. Or there's just high humidity as a result of air coming in and not exhausting out. Either way, and not only that, I'll throw out a third option. The actual home can have plumbing leaks where your pipes break, the drains fail, and they leak onto the subfloor, and then that in turn kind of molds out the subfloor. It might rot it out completely, but it might just grow a bunch of mold on the bottom of the subfloor because it's been wet from an actual plumbing event or a prolonged slow leak. Either way, that's another source for crawl space mold. And another issue that needs to be addressed. The floor needs to come up. Some of that subfloor needs replaced. And all those old leaks need to be addressed and cleaned up thoroughly and properly. But anyway, airflow is the most common. High humidity is the most common as far as mold growth and the source of mold in a crawl space. So, couple things on the actual removal process. What do you do when you've got all this mold? You've got mold on the actual wood, you've got mold on the subfloor and the joists, and it smells, it's toxic, it's not good down there. How you get it off the wood? Well, in our industry, one of the main processes is using peroxide. Nice strong 22% peroxide applied to the lumber. What that does is activates and starts to draw the organic out of the wood and pull it to the surface, similar to when you put it on a cut, and which is much less aggressive. This is two different types of peroxide. Peroxide for your skin or your wound is made for cleaning a wound, and it's just going to bubble up, and it's going to help you clean that wound and get it fixed so it doesn't get infected. Mold removal peroxide, different animal, very strong, very aggressive. It's going to be sprayed to the wood, and you're going to see that same white foam activate on the surface when it's encountering an organic such as mold. And it's going to pull it to the surface where we can then remove it more thoroughly by using cleaning wipes or using a HEPA vacuum. Both work well. We use both on our mold jobs. I will scrub and clean the mold off the wood, and then I'll vacuum it as well. Another thing that I think is kind of controversial, once the mold removal has taken place and you got that wood in a nice clean state, I like to use an antimicrobial coating, and I like to use clear so that you're not covering any shoddy mold removal that just wasn't done thoroughly with a white colored coating. I like the clear. It's easier to clean up, but also you basically apply a clear product over the wood, and if you didn't clean it, thoroughly, you can see that in the finish. So it's not something you can hide. You can't hide mold when you're using clear product. That will make the lumber more mold resistant, but it really makes the wood clean again. So now you've had this funky mold that dust would stick to, and high humidity would affect this lumber and it would start to grow mold. You clean that, you encapsulate that, or you end up sealing it with your mold resistant coating, and now it's got a clean finish. So it's just like your piece of furniture that's got a finish. It's like your drywall that's now got paint instead of just raw paper. All that stuff is good. Now it's just not dusty anymore, and the dust won't stick to it near as easily. So you start over with a brand new surface whenever you apply this coating to that structural wood down in your crawl space, for example. You can do the same thing in a basement or even an attic or even your wall cavities inside your home. You add this coating, and the wood is now smoother, cleaner, and more mold resistant. So I believe in using the coatings in mold remediation projects. The other thing, though, once we've done the good thorough cleanup and we've removed this mold, one thing I would bring up, you want full control over the air when you're doing this removal project. When you're in the middle of scrubbing mold off of these joists and subfloor, and you're spraying the peroxide on the wood, and all the cleaning, it needs to be under negative pressure. That means equipment is in the crawl space, or it's located to pull air out of the crawl space, and all the air from the house, any openings between the floor and the subfloor and the crawl space, that air is going to be going into the crawl space, not exhausting back out into the house. So negative pressure is essential when you're doing this remediation in the crawl space. But once you've gotten all of that mold done, all the mold removal done, and everything is back in a brand new state, better than new, air quality is good, now we need to prevent it. We need to try and create the right atmosphere in the crawl space so that this never comes back. We don't want to support mold growth anymore with high humidity. So we need to figure out, how do we control humidity? How do we keep this from happening ever again? I'm going to make a second video, and we're going to talk about encapsulation process. So this is kind of part one on crawl space remediation. So for now, we'll push pause. I'll come back with a second video, and we'll talk about long-term prevention of mold in crawl spaces. Thanks. Ben Fetzer, Advanced Microbial.